welcome to another edition of the Employee Spotlight, except for this one's going to be a little bit different. So February is Black History Month, and we wanted to take some time to actually highlight some of our employees who are Black and are celebrating their history in this month and our history as a nation in this month. And we wanted to make sure that we were having some honest and good conversations about their career, how they got into cybersecurity, and what it means to young professionals who are considering this, who may also be in the minority. And, just maybe talking through like what their experiences have been. And it's not lost on me that I'm a white woman interviewing you guys. So I'm going to have a lot of the dumb questions, and I'm going to ask for your forgiveness throughout this whole thing, because I really want to get to the heart of the experience that you've had and what kind of messages that you want to bring out to our audiences. We are super excited and proud of the diversity that honestly has happened very organically within our organization. We look for the best talent and the best talents on the team. And it's quite a diverse team that we have. But in the age of talking about this and making sure that we really are bringing some of these issues to the forefront, we wanted to take some time to focus on that. So Katrina and Dion, welcome to today's Employee Spotlight.
Hey, good morning. My name is Katrina Watts. Thank you so much, Erin. I'm glad to be here to provide some overview of my experiences to the employees here. So thank you.
Absolutely. And what position do you host or hold at CyberClan?
I'm a junior technical project manager, working alongside or under actually Dion. So just glad to be here with the team.
Great. Okay. And Dion?
How you doing? Thanks for having me, Erin. My name is Dion Symonette, and I am I am a senior, senior PM. So
Senior PM. Okay.
Yeah.
He's my LeBron and I'm his Kelly.
There
we have
you
a
go.
running joke. Yes, that's actually a very appropriate conversation we should probably have for this particular episode, because it was a moment where we were each exploring our race and the stereotypes that people often have, and where I think Dion was telling a fun story where a stereotypical mistake that a white colleague might have had by saying, you look a lot like LeBron James, and we all can look at Dion right now and say, nope, not really. No resemblance at all other than skin color. And so we all had a good laugh about it. And then about an hour later, Dion turned to me and said, you know who you remind me of? Kelly Ripa. And I said, because I'm white female and I'm small? Like what?
But so I think more people would agree with me that you look a little bit more like Kelly Ripa than I do LeBron.
Maybe. I'm not sold yet on that argument, but I thought it was a good and awkward but healthy conversation we got to have. Being colleagues of different color, I thought that really opened up some, vulnerability in being able to have some of these candid conversations. So I will upfront just throw a disclosure out there. If I say something that is not right, I'm here to learn just as much as anybody else. So please, by all means, feel free to call me out on it so that I know. So what we want to talk a little bit about is how both of you reached this particular point in your career, and what were your experiences early on in your career. So Katrina, if I could start with you, sort of how would you build up to the point in your career now, and what experiences would you like to share with folks about what you experienced?
Sure. So honestly, I actually kind of studied a different path. I went down a different path where I kind of transitioned to the cybersecurity field based on my original studies in the legal field. And it was difficult, I think, especially at the time, because though there are a lot of resources online that are available, like readily available to you now, pathways into breaking into cyber were difficult to kind of define at the time. But I think just having the right attitude, being consistent, persistent, it pays dividends. And I think a lot of times I got lucky just meeting great folks and them seeing something in me. I think I'll honestly, even in this situation with this role right now, somebody seeing something in me that they think is going to be complementary to the program that they have, and just dedication and passion or whatever else that might be. So the road has been interesting for sure. I've had a lot of different roles working in the security field, which have taught me a ton. But they weren't always easy. The road to getting into this field and progressing isn't always easy. I've had some experiences as a woman, a Black woman, where my mentality in general is just, be the best, do the best, get the best, get the best results. And sometimes you run into circumstances where you are running into walls and you're not really necessarily sure why. And my mentality always has just been, just keep after it, whatever else. But in, the last couple of years, I've had to have some reflection on these walls and barriers that I've been faced with, thinking that, does this have anything to do with me racially or, sex wise or anything else like that? So things like that can be a bit alarming, but at the same time, you just keep building and you keep going. You can't just give up because of situations like that. And honestly, getting into this role now, I won't get super deep into the conversation, but when I was interviewing with Dion, it was supposed to be a 30-minute interview, but we ended up talking for, I think, well over an hour. And we talked about diversity. We talked about some of those things that I was really hoping to get in my next role. And, checked all boxes here, that CyberClan offers a lot of that diversity, that the staff is super diverse. Obviously, I'll have a chance to work with Dion. So those were things that were reigning pretty high on my list of wants from a new role. So I'm just glad to be
That's
here.
great.
It's definitely a great transition. So
that's awesome. I would love to, I want to put a pin in a question I'll have for you just after this, but I want to let Dion speak a little bit about his past. But you mentioned something around having to have reflection back and seeing the barriers that were put in front of you. And being a female, I've had to have some of those conversations with myself as well. So I'd love to, after Dion talks about speaking with both of you about that responsibility you carry to determine when did I actually think there was some racism, true racism present, and what should my response have been then, and how have I developed new responsibilities about how I approach those types of things. So let's come back to that question in a minute, but maybe you can think about it a little bit since you mentioned it. And Dion, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and some experiences you've had along the way that would help people.
Okay, just when I reflect back on my career and how when I got into IT, it was it's interesting. I remember being in university. I was at American University and trying to get internships in IT positions. And my degree was in management of information systems, and I had studied quite a few things. I was ready. Was ready to jump in, and no one would give me a job. And they always would say that you don't have the skill set. I said, well, that's why I'm trying to work as an intern. So it was really confusing to me. I could get jobs writing papers and doing other things, running a copy machine, but no one would give me a job as an intern. And, my GPA was like a 3.8, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And it just the opportunities just weren't coming my way when some of my classmates were landing really nice jobs at different companies. And so I ended up, I had done a study abroad, and I did the study abroad, and I got when I went to France, and I applied at Lucent Technologies in Sophia Antipolis for a position, and they gave it to me, and they were just so happy. They didn't see me as, I can say this. I mean, of course, they saw my color, but they saw me as an American, not as a Black American. They just saw me as an American. And that's what they wanted, that American ingenuity and, leaders in technology. And I was working in their what they consider their Silicon Valley of France in Sophia Antipolis. And I got a job there. The responsibilities were great that they gave to me. And I was learning the different systems, and, it was different. It was just so different. And then when I came back to the US at that point, then I started receiving job offers. Only then did I start, but I had the experience at that point. But again, right, even working in those positions I was getting, I was finding that people who were coming on board were, who were white males, didn't have any experience. And I was training them to be supervisors or managers. And in this field, that I had to go overseas to get experience to then come back to then right, train my managers who had no experience. And so that was one interesting point. And another part of when I first started working in IT was I ended up working in, IT being a basement. And I ended up working with one gentleman, an older gentleman, and he told me straight out that he thought it was a waste of time for me to even be there, and that he was a proud member of the Ku Klux Klan, and he didn't see anything wrong with that. And I just was like, okay, well, it is what it is. I was more interested in getting my work and in learning about IT, so I really didn't care about what his position was. And so, I was like, okay, well, we can just work together, and we don't have to really interact and so forth. But he was my trainer. But I'd like to say by the time I left there, we hadn't developed a friendship, so to speak, but we had a good working relationship where I think I dispelled a lot of his beliefs that Blacks were lazy, didn't want to learn anything, couldn't learn, all these different things. And he'd even told me so much so at one point. And, I just smiled and just kept on going about my business. But, he would look for me. Like, I think one day I didn't come to work. I had taken off for some reason. And when I got back to work, he was like, hey, I set up this whole training for you. I want to show you all these different things. And, and it got to that point where I was one of the only people, people in the company would be like, well, can you go talk to him? Because he doesn't talk to anybody else. So he doesn't say anything to anybody else. So we developed that sort of a relationship. And it was good to see, sometimes they say, it's better just, someone going to say something nasty to you, just smile and keep going, and you win them over with kindness. And that's effectively what I pretty much did. But just my career through, now ending up here, other things going on, and then ending up here at CyberClan. One of the things that I relate to other people when I say about CyberClan is I don't know what those reasons are. Maybe it's Canadian company, minority owned company, but I didn't feel anything about race. It was just about whether or not I could do the job. And that just seemed to be the only qualification. And I haven't felt a race issue, just can you do the job? And that's it. So one of the things I like about being here.
Yeah, that's great. And I definitely, we sort of were joking about it only because it's such a topic of conversation in the workplace period right now around diversity. But I remember, I'm in charge of marketing, and I'm having to put together these PowerPoint presentations and putting bios and names and pictures against to show our team. And I'm going, what I love about this is, like, I haven't had to think about diversity. It's right there on the paper through no intentionality necessarily, not that I know of, at least. No quotas, no nothing like that. Like, the best talent is the talent that we've got on the page, and it's diverse, and it's eye-opening and awesome to know that, like, we haven't had to question of, like, should we go finding talent? It's talent is coming to us, and we are, looking for the best talent in the market, regardless of gender, of race, and so forth. And so I'm very proud of that particular feeling in this organization. I'm glad to hear that you both feel it as well. That being said, both of you sort of brought it up in different ways. This sort of underlying being able to recognize when individuals are either blatantly telling you they're card-carrying members of the Ku Klux Klan, which just blows my mind, but it is something that people do need to hear, that, like, this stuff really does happen, and it shouldn't actually shock you. It does happen. It happens way more than you think. But both of you had to kind of come up through experiences like that, probably still have to experience things like that. I certainly see it as a woman. How have you, at this stage of your career, worked out what your responsibility in that is of calling out or speaking for or speaking against certain behaviors and perhaps conscious or unconscious biases that are happening? Either one of you want to take that as a question?
I'll let Katrina go first.
Sorry, I put myself on mute while Dion was talking. So, I think a lot of times when dealing with, issues of racism or prejudice, I find myself maybe not necessarily being as direct as I would want to be, but I think as time has gone on, I've been able to become a lot more direct about these issues, especially with the tension and the way that the world is right now. It's one of those things that I try not to fixate on the fact that if something happened, if it had something to do with my race or gender, it might just be to me, I think about it like, if this is a position or a situation that I need to be in, then, there are the universe is going to put out other things for me to be able to do, right? So I'm not going to stay stagnant or stuck into a situation where I'm being, made completely, uncomfortable with my role. And that is something that has happened to me in the past. It's one of those things upon reflection, I wasn't really sure what was going on, but I knew it was something that was, it seemed targeted, and it wasn't something that I could really get out of, based on the hierarchy of the position where I was and everything else like that. So at that point, it's like, I want to feel comfortable in my role and feel at home when I'm at work. If I'm feeling some sort of, tension or feeling that I don't feel that same comfort level, it might be time to seek, some other, position elsewhere where someone is going to recognize and treat me with the respect that, I so deserve. So that's a lot of the time how my mentality has been. But, in the more recently, I feel like, having those conversations with people, being open, if someone is being open with me, like in this dialogue, Aaron, you said, keep me honest, if you're saying something, somebody wants to be open and have a dialogue, we're going to be open and have a dialogue about racial relations and any sort of concerns or issues we might have. But yeah, I mean, the one role I'm speaking of, definitely, white male dominated company. When I first got there, was very shocked because in this industry in general, it's a male dominated industry, and it is a white male dominated industry in general. But in most roles I've been in, I'm usually one of the only females there, definitely only Black female there, if there are any others. So I got used to, being and working with a lot of males in general. But when I got there, I was very surprised to see that it was a very white male dominated company in general. And so much so that I didn't have anyone, telling me they were a card carrying member of the KKK, but this guy, walked around daily with an NRA hat, and just walked around the company that way. And he was like a help desk person, and it was completely okay. It was completely okay. So, I mean, and this isn't one of those things to race fight or anything like that when it comes to that, but it's just, some sort of, potentially in most cases, unacceptable behavior being accepted, and being not just accepted, sometimes, in my opinion, I think, glamorized in some cases. Right. So it was definitely one of those things that, you kind of start seeing the environment that you're in, and you say, I'm going to do the best that I can in this environment. But if it's something that becomes too daunting, it might just not be the environment for me.
How about you, Dion?
I will ask you to go ahead and repeat that question again for me so I can,
Well, just knowing that there might have been points in your career, especially, I think if we're talking to individuals that are starting out in their career, a lot of people can feel very threatened to say something, or to, you're constantly walking that line of, well, if I say that I think that something has something to do with race, then people are going to pigeonhole me as someone who's always going to make everything about race. But at the same time, I have a responsibility to speak up for myself if I truly feel that there's some sort of prejudice here. And now that you've been in your career for quite some time, not calling you old, but you've been experienced. You're a mature individual. I think we're probably about the same age, but you can look back on it. And how do you now sort of think through, and how would you encourage others to think through their responsibility in addressing these types of things, or in feeling comfortable in encouraging them to know that it is okay to say, you know what, I think something unfair is going off right now and I need to address it? Or how have you internalized, here are the things I'm not going to address. Here are the things I'm going to just keep my head down and do what I'm supposed to do. How are you finding balancing those two decisions whenever you're faced with discrimination?
Okay, so as you said, I'm mature in this environment, and I think at different points I've been, you adjust. When I was younger, I was more quiet. I wouldn't say anything. It was more, okay. I wouldn't laugh at the jokes, but I also wouldn't say anything. So I would just walk away because I just wanted to keep my job. As I got older, I got more to the point where I drew lines, where if, there was an issue, I was more inclined to pull someone aside and say, hey, do you understand what you just said was a problem? or if I had to, if it was a manager, I'm very quick, and people who know me that know that I'm very quick. I'll doesn't really matter who it is. I'll open an office door for the CEO and shut the door behind me and tell him what I thought about what he said, or how I felt about it. Now I'm more inclined to just call you out on the open. I don't. I'm not. It's a thin line for a black male or black female, actually, because they can be considered, a black female would be considered bitchy, a black male would be considered aggressive. I've been around a table and we're all shooting around ideas, and I get excited and I'm shooting my idea out, and then I stop talking and I look and everyone's quiet, like, oh, he's really aggressive, because I've been like the only black around the table. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, so moving on to and I'm like, I wasn't aggressive. I'm sorry. I got a little passionate about it, but there was no aggression. I tried to smile, I tried to laugh,
Right.
and it's always toggling that line, trying to make sure that you aren't quote unquote stereotypical, because you show us, if a white male comes up there and bangs his desk hand on the table, they're like, oh my God, hey, look at him. He's got that passion. If I bang my hand on the table, it's like, oh shoot, security. So it's trying to find that line. Last company I worked for, as I've progressed and matured, there were many issues, like all these issues that have come up to white people recently. And I say to white people because they've always been there. They just started noticing them, like George Floyd and some of the other, Orlando Castile and some of the other, Breonna Taylor. We were at the office, and I think it was just Castile had just been shot, and they were, arguing, we were walking in the hall with some friends and some coworkers, and they mentioned that, oh, yeah, he should have just, given them what they asked for and not been aggressive. And I was like, well, hold on. He actually was doing what they asked him to do. He was making sure he did everything to not be aggressive. But even in that situation, had he been aggressive, if that was a white male in that same car, right, going for something, and he had a child and a woman in the car, even then they still would not have shot. They would have surrounded the car, done a lot of things, but no one would have shot a gun into a car with a child and a young lady. So, and then we got onto this discussion. We ended up, and they were asking me, well, explain to us, because we don't understand. And there were some white colleagues, and we went into a side room and we had the conversation, and they were like, well, I don't understand. I said, well, would you believe that I got arrested before? And they were like, what? You? No, you're like the nicest black guy we know, and they're like, and I was like, well, how many black guys do you actually know? And then they had to pause. Well, I don't know many, but I was like, well, there you go. So you just assume, right? So we got into that whole conversation, and they were like, well, why'd you get arrested? I said, for parking on school property. And they're like, what? That doesn't even make sense. Was it a private school? I was like, no, it was a public school that was adjacent to a public park in an area. And the cop pulled up, and I was getting into my car to leave, and he decided that, he wanted to harass me. And I was like, okay, fine, just get the harassment over so I can go. And the young lady that I was with started screaming, this is racist. And I was like, oh God, please, no, stop. Don't say anything. Just let him do what he has to do, and I'll be gone in like 10 minutes. But if you start screaming, it's going to cause a problem. And sure enough, it caused a problem. And he decided, because he was mad at her for telling him he was racist, that he was going to arrest me. And it ended up me getting arrested and spending the night in jail and then coming out. And, it was just really stupid. And what bothered me, I think the most, was every cop that I met at every stage thought it was crazy, but they were complicit, because he would come and whisper in their ear, and then they would let it go. But this is just, and again, mind you, I was in a suit. I had my government ID on. There was, I wasn't a threat. Even the people, once I got inside the cell, were looking at me like, why are you in here? Right. So it's little things like that. But I just learned to be, I'm not confrontational, but I will confront you. And I know a lot of times that I will do it, because a lot of times when you confront people around other people, they stick their chests out and want to beat on it. But when you confront people in private, they have more of a tendency to talk, and you can have an actual dialogue. And,
Right.
just from the time that I was at the other position and we had that conversation one-on-one, we started a whole bunch of diversity conversations that were a little bit more in depth, where we could have discussions that people could take their gloves off and say, hey, I voted for Trump and I like Trump. And I said, okay, well, that's your choice. Why? Well, these are the reasons why I don't. And then they get different perspectives. And so it was similar to this, but it was very open. So and that's now I'm just, again, like I said, I'm not confrontational, but I will confront.
Yeah. Well, first I should say, the moment you said I had a suit on and a government ID, my heart breaks just a tad there, because why should anyone have to justify what they're wearing? It doesn't matter. It should not have been ever a moment where what you were wearing even had to come into consideration, right? It was wrong and they should not have arrested you. And that is clear and present. So I'm very sorry for that experience. I don't wish those types of experiences on anyone. And I do hope that people will hear us and learn from these types of things, because I do think, and we were talking about this a little bit before we came on air, it is still surprising to me how many people, if you haven't experienced it yourself, still can't wrap their head around that it really very blatantly does still happen. And that's, it shouldn't threaten people to hear that it still happens. It should be an opportunity to learn and to be able to see it and to not be complicit in it and to not encourage it and to be part of the solution. But I do think that there's something about mentioning comments like that or situations like that that do trigger people into feeling like threatened by the fact that it still happens, as opposed to going, oh, well, that's just wrong and it shouldn't happen anymore. So I appreciate you sharing that experience. I know that we have to wrap up here, and I don't want to cut this conversation short. I could have it for hours. But something very specific that I thought was interesting that you shared with me, Dion, at the beginning, and certainly Katrina, please weigh in on this, is that even this industry, if we're talking about cybersecurity and IT specifically, has terminology in it that in and of itself, someone who who wouldn't think about those types of terms, such as you were mentioning, that when your first job in IT, where someone is saying, grab the master and the slave, those being terminology that are used in the industry, but hello.
And on the sexist side, the male and the female end,
right.
It's
right.
Yeah.
It's very small things, and for us to just even take a minute to think about what does that say? How does saying it maybe affect someone who's hearing it, and right. how do we think about that? I think that's at a minimum, that's what we can encourage and ask of people, is to take the time to think about it for a hot second and understand it and hear it and listen. You don't have to. No one's going to put you on trial. But they do expect to be heard and seen, and their experiences to be validated. So if I could just wrap up with both of you providing, and Katrina, I'll start with you, what piece of advice would you give young people of color considering a role in the security industry? What advice would you give them, and what would you have told your younger self?
So it's interesting, and I don't want to get too off tangent, but this reminds me of an actual situation that happened. I was at a conference, speaking at a conference, and a guy came up to me, a white male came up to me, and we have a bit of a relationship. So he says to me, how can we get more people like you to be here at this conference? And I was really taken aback by his question, and but I also was celebratory in a sense that he felt comfortable enough asking me a question like that. So it's a twofold thing, right? And I agreed with him in a sense that, I do want to see more people like me here in this space. And specifically, it was at an oil and gas conference. So it's one of those things that that the diversity there. I mean, I'm not going to say there's any diversity in oil and gas, but there is a lack there too. And then cybersecurity on top of that, there's a bit of a lack of diversity. But I would say that obviously we have our panel here. There is representation in this field for you. right? There's representation in this field for you. I see more and more, I'm on LinkedIn, a part of some, Black cybersecurity organizations. I see more and more that there is a lot more diversity coming into this field. It's trickling, as compared to others, but I see that there's an interest. What I think is great about cybersecurity is that, the information that you can learn is really endless, right? There's so many different roles. There's people, I've heard all these different, misnomers that, oh, you have to know how to code to do this. You have to, be good at math to do this. There's so many different roles. And I think a lot of times that becomes a barrier that people think that becomes impossible to break in or do it. And I think more and more folks are starting to realize that there are many other pathways to get into security that have nothing to do with either of those two specific things. But if you are interested in that and you do have interest in tech or coding or whatever else, that there's opportunities there for you as well. So it's just one of those, if you have a passion for it, there will be a way. I mean, one last thing, sorry, I graduated during the time of the, housing market collapse, and it was rough at that time. So I can imagine that folks that might be trying to get into security right now, based on COVID and the economic downturn, might be feeling like every door is being slammed in their face. And I thought that I wasn't going to be able to make it through, but I did, and it just takes persistence. You just have to be kind to yourself. Some opportunities, I just think I'm a big proponent of everything happens for a reason. So some opportunities, your opportunity is there. Whatever it is, it's destined, it will be there. It's for you. So just keep trying, keep chugging along in that sense. Thanks.
What about you, Dion?
All right. Well, just some of it. You can't get a pig and expect it to climb a tree. And I see that a lot of organizations tend to do that. They see your skill set, they ignore it, and then they try to get you to do something that your skill set doesn't necessarily fit. And then they say, oh, see, this is why you can't do cybersecurity, or you can't do technology, those things. For minorities, and that's especially true, I think a lot of times for minorities, and they don't take the time to look at your skill set and what you can bring to the table. But when you do get companies that actually try to see what it is you do, what is your skill set, and then try to fit it in and see how it can work, I think it works a lot better. But I think so many people and companies are so busy putting up obstacles. So like what Katrina said, they're like, oh, if you're not good at IT, you can't be in tech. Oh, if you're not good at IT, you can't be work in cybersecurity. When the fact of the matter is, there are people who do many different varied things in cybersecurity, and cybersecurity is huge. There's policy, there's, the person on the ground, the tech, the managers, the PMs. I mean,
marketing.
Marketing. There's so many different things in cybersecurity, but they are quick to say, oh, it's almost, they want to make you fearful. And I think a lot of people harp on that. As a person who's worked in tech for many years, and every time I started somewhere, they would always put me back at the bottom to say that, oh, well, you worked in a NOC, but you never worked help desk. I'm like, I don't understand. That doesn't make sense. But I always had to start over again. Always, so I kept for every 2 steps forward, I'd take 5 steps back, and then, 5 steps forward, then 10 steps back. And it just kept going that way, and, looking at the years I had and still having to be junior to somebody who I was more senior than, just because, and I can't say, I assume it's the color of my skin, but, maybe there's some flaw in me. I don't think so. But, it was just those different things and constantly getting put back, and then seeing other people who were less qualified, move forward, and that person even acknowledging to me that they don't know why they're in that position over me, because they're coming to me for help. So things like that, and just telling someone to just to keep your chin up, keep fighting the good fight, and understanding that there are other opportunities out there. If someone won't open that door for you, somebody else will. Keep knocking, and just have those straight conversations when you walk into those situations where you're interviewing, and say, hey, listen, is there a problem, that I am this color, because I do have this skill set and I can use it in this environment, so just give me an opportunity, so.
I love that. Well, I don't want to take up more of your time because both of you are very busy doing very important things for our company, managing big projects. So I'm going to let you guys go, even though I know that we could be talking about this forever. We are going to have another conversation with a few other individuals at our organization later. And I hope that we'll keep this conversation going on throughout the year. I've always found it great that we have a month where we can talk about it, but this is a year-round issue. So I'm hoping that we will have more conversations, that you guys will come back and share more of your thoughts and insights with me and with our audience, because I really appreciate the candid nature and vulnerability that you're exhibiting here. And we do care about our humans, all of our humans. So thank you much for being a part of the team and for sharing your hearts today.
All right. Thank you for having us.
Sure.
Take care.
Absolutely.